Hello, welcome to MNPS Accelerating Scholars. This is Module 4, Childhood Protection and FERPA. If you're accessing this module, that means you've already completed Modules 1, 2, and 3. This is your final tutor training module. Here's an overview of the training modules. Today, you'll be going through Module 4. Here are our objectives for this session. First, we'll learn about FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Next, we'll focus on setting boundaries to create appropriate relationships with your students. Finally, we'll use this knowledge to think through some practice scenarios regarding student safety, privacy, and appropriate relationships. Let's get started. This module consists of 3 sections. First, what is FERPA, and what are its implications for tutors? Second, setting boundaries, appropriate relationships. And third, practice scenarios. First, let's take a look at FERPA. FERPA stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. FERPA states that all educators, including you as tutors, are bound to protect student privacy and confidentiality. Any information you receive regarding a student's academic performance or other personal information is confidential and must not be shared with anyone other than the student's teacher or the school-based tutor lead. It's important to think about the different ways in which a student's confidential information may be disclosed to you. For example, students might share personal information to you verbally, or they may share information regarding academic performance through assignments or written grades. Remember, this information must remain confidential unless the student's teacher or the school-based tutor lead needs to know. It's also important to keep in mind that everyone in Tennessee is a mandatory reporter. If abuse or neglect is suspected or disclosed to you by your student, you must report this information to a school official. If a student tells you something that is a safety concern, it is important to share that information with the tutor lead or school personnel as soon as possible. For additional guidance, all tutors must review the Module 4 training supplement, which addresses being prepared to respond to some other concerns that may arise when working with students, including abuse or neglect, human trafficking, suicidal ideations or threats, bullying or harassment, or other threats. The Module 4 training supplement will be available on the MNPS Tutor Resource website. Take a moment to consider the following question. All of the following are in accordance with FERPA, except A, telling your tutor lead about a student's score on their most recent test. B, sharing student work on your social media platforms. C, sharing general examples of student progress in your university courses or assignments without identifying the student. Or D, sharing important information about the student's academic progress with their teacher for the relevant subject area. If you selected answer B, you are correct. Answer B presents a situation in which information about a student would be shared publicly without consent, which violates the student's right to privacy. All other choices are examples of allowable communication in accordance with FERPA guidelines. Section 2, setting boundaries and fostering appropriate relationships. Now that we've learned about FERPA, let's take some time to talk about setting boundaries to foster appropriate relationships with your students. Here are some basic rules to keep in mind when setting boundaries with students. All communication between volunteer tutors, whether virtual or in person, and students should be through the Go School Box platform, which allows students and tutors to send messages during and after tutoring sessions. Tutors cannot exchange cell phone numbers, email addresses, or social media accounts with their students. Do not post pictures or information about your students on social media platforms. Finally, keep in mind that you are the adult. It's your responsibility to set a good example for students in creating appropriate boundaries. As the tutor, you are responsible for conversations addressing the student's learning. However, certain boundaries must exist between the tutor and the student in order to maintain a safe and positive environment. These boundaries include, but are not limited to, private family life, romantic relationships, explicit content, and financial situations. When these topics arise in conversation with students, try to get the conversation back on track to focus on the academic content for the day. A helpful tip when thinking about setting boundaries with students: remember the acronym MNPS. Make sure that students know the expectations for what is appropriate. Notify your school tutor lead if you ever have questions or concerns about appropriate boundaries. Promote a safe and positive environment. And steer the conversation to focus on learning and academic growth. Take a moment to consider the following question. Which of the following is an example of a violation of appropriate boundaries as an Accelerating Scholars tutor? A, texting a student. B, following a student's TikTok account. C, posting a selfie with a student on Instagram. D, sending a gift to the student's home address. Or E, all of the above. If you selected E, of course, you are correct. None of these actions are appropriate for an Accelerating Scholars tutor. All choices would be a violation of appropriate boundaries. Remember, all communication with students should only be through the Go School Box tutoring platform. Personal contact information should never be exchanged. Now that we've learned a bit more about FERPA, student safety, and healthy appropriate boundaries, let's take some time to think through some possible scenarios that could occur while you're tutoring. Here's our first practice scenario. A student is struggling with a problem, but her laptop camera isn't working to show you her paper. The student asks if she can text you a picture of the problem from her phone. How should you respond? A, give the student your number, but tell her that this is the only time she should contact you via text. B, give the student your personal email address instead. C, tell the student you cannot exchange any personal contact information with her. Ask her to talk you through the problem and try to work through it together. Or D, skip the problem. If you chose answer C, you are correct. Remember, you should never exchange personal contact information with students, even if it is for academic purposes. This is a violation of boundaries. Tell the student that you cannot exchange your personal contact information with her. Ask the student to speak with her teacher or the tutor lead to get the laptop fixed. Follow up with the tutor lead after the session to report this tech issue. Here's our second practice scenario. It's your first day of tutoring, and you are excited to build rapport with your new student. You're looking for a discussion topic that would be a good icebreaker. Which of the following topics is appropriate? A, which neighborhood do you live in? B, do you live with your parents? C, what is your favorite hobby outside of school? D, do you have any social media? If you chose C, you are correct. Remember, it's okay to ask questions about student interests and hobbies, but it's important to maintain appropriate boundaries. You should not be asking students personal questions about family or home life, nor should your relationship extend beyond your Accelerating Scholars sessions and the Go School Box platform. Time for our third practice scenario. You're having trouble communicating a particular math concept with your student. A friend of yours happens to be a math teacher in another city. When asking for help from your friend, what can you reveal? A, the concepts you're having trouble communicating. B, your student's first name. C, your student's math assessment level or score, but not his name. D, a picture of your student's attempts to work through the problem. If you chose answer A, you are correct. Remember, under FERPA, you cannot share any personal or academic information about your students unless the student's teacher or school-based tutor lead needs to know. To protect student privacy, all information must remain confidential. However, if needed, you could ask for help from your colleague or friend regarding the math concept itself, as long as no personal or academic information about the student is disclosed. Let's look at practice scenario number 4. A student has come to you about an issue involving his teacher. Who can assist you in handling this situation? A, another teacher at the school. B, your friend who is also a tutor. C, your professor. Or D, the school-based tutor lead. If you chose D, you're correct. The school-based tutor lead is your main point of contact for any needs that may arise while tutoring. Time for our fifth and final practice scenario. During tutoring, a student tells you about her recent struggles with anxiety. What would be an appropriate response? A, I have anxiety too. Let's talk about it together. B, do you talk to a therapist? C, why do you have these thoughts? Or D, I'm sorry to hear you're feeling this way. I can talk to your teacher or someone at your school to find someone who might be able to help you through this. If you chose answer D, you're correct. Remember, it's important to acknowledge when students tell you personal information, especially if it's a health or safety concern. But remember that this information is confidential and should only be shared with the necessary school personnel who can work to provide the student with needed support. You have now completed Module 4, Childhood Protection in FERPA. What questions do you still have about this session's content? please share your questions with us at tutoring@mnps.org. If you have additional questions, please refer to the MNPS Tutor Guidebook or contact us. Thank you for completing your tutor training, and thank you again for signing up to tutor with Accelerating Scholars this semester. We look forward to seeing you soon.